In Tunisia, Mohamed is cracking and scraping at snails to make authentic Tyrian purple dye. Further south in Uganda, Akello is pounding and grinding nuts by hand to make this silky, luxurious East African shea butter. Across Africa, small businesses and artisans are making some of the world's most expensive products. Our first stop is Fez, Morocco, where clay bars have been molded and transformed into colourful, handmade Zellige tiles for centuries.
Zellige tiles start out as a simple mixture of clay and water. But after several days of painstaking work, artisans chisel and transform them into a complex work of art. Compared to other popular tiles, Zellige tiles aren't cheap. A square foot can cost $50, while ceramic subway tiles might only cost around 15 cents. But this art form relies on the skilled artisans that make each tile by hand. Like Ahmed Al-Magari, who has been making Zellige tiles for 54 years. So how are Zellige tiles made? And is this what makes them so expensive? While perfection is often valued, it's the imperfect qualities of Zellige that make the tiles so unique. Artisans in Morocco have been hand-making Zellige tiles for centuries. Today, they continue this tradition in the city of Fez.
يعني خدمة ما كتشبه الخدمة وهندسة ما كتشبه الهندسة حتى كيولي الإنسان عنده مقتدر كيولي عنده واحد التجربة في الصنعة لأن الصنعة ما يمكنلكش تقول أنا راني معلم ما عمرك ما تقول أنا معلم لأن ديما كتتعلم ديما الجديد.
But before artisans at Arabesque can create tiles, they first need to form the clay. Fez has remained a center for Zellige partly because of these rocks. They're considered some of the best materials in the region for making high-quality clay.
الطين هذا ديال المغرب هذا الأصل ديالو مغربي وكاين غير في مدينة فاس.
This clay is believed to be more durable than some clays found further south, and it can withstand very high temperatures once fired. First, an artisan tosses the rocks into a pit in the ground called a zuba. They fill the zuba with water and leave the rocks to soften for a day. Then, in one of many tedious stages to come, an artisan kneads the clay using their hands and feet to make it more malleable. After the clay has fermented for a day, a different artisan has the task of molding it into the proper shape. The artisan places the clay into a mold, smoothing it over with one hand so the surface is flat. For every 10 kilograms of clay, artisans can make over 10 square feet, or about 1 meter of tiles. After molding hundreds of tiles, they leave the clay to dry under the sun. The next stage is vital to ensuring the tiles will remain intact.
نحطوا القلة فوق منها القياس كنجيب واحد الكوتشية جنوية كيضربها باش كتقاد كتعطينا سنتيم ونص سنتيم وشوية على حساب القياس اللي بغينا حنا.
Hitting the clay repeatedly also removes air bubbles. If the air isn't removed, the tile may break when an artisan later tries to chisel it. Once each piece is perfectly square, the tiles dry again under the sun. Finally, it's time for the clay to head to the kiln. Precision is critical at this stage, which is why just one person is trusted to lead the job.
وكنهزوه كنجيبوه المرحله هي هذه كيبس ملي كنجيبوه كيبس المرحله كندخلوه للفرينه احنا كندخلوه للفرينه هي هذه كيدخل للفرينه كيكون الشحان عندنا شحان اختصاصي بهذا الشيء لما كنشوفه هو ما يتشحنش هذه الفرينه هذا الاختصاص تعلم هذه الحرفه هذه تعلمها من الطفوله ديالو.
Abdelwahed glazes the tiles and then they're fired for a second time, This second firing ensures the color won't fade. It also gives Zellige tiles one of their most distinct features. Heat doesn't circulate evenly in a traditional Moroccan kiln, which is why each tile, even those with the same color glaze, will have a slightly different shade. But these tiles are just getting started. After glazing, the tiles move on to the cutting stage, where artisans trace the small shapes they'll later carve. Chiseling the tiles requires total concentration. Artisans must carve each piece as cleanly as possible. Otherwise, it may not fit properly into the final design. How well and efficiently this is done depends on the expertise of the artisan, and a tool known as the menkash. It's a combination of a hammer and an axe. Because they're hand-chiseled, no two Zellige tiles will look exactly the same. It's the prime feature that distinguishes Zellige from mass-produced tiles that are notably uniform in color, shape, and texture. Arabesque first creates designs on the computer. Then Ahmed uses a paper printout as a guide to assemble the final design on the floor. Ahmed inserts each individual tile by hand, like a puzzle piece, making sure every tile seamlessly fits next to its neighbor.
يعني كتشوف العين ديالك باليد ديالك الحواس ديالك كلها عقلك الحواس ديالك كلها كتخدم مع داك الحاجه اللي كتكون كتخدم فيها بعد سميتو 1000 قطعه عاد يمكن لها تعمر لك متر وبعض الخطره يمكن غير مثلا 100 قطعه غتعمر لك متر.
After about 15 days of assembling the pieces, Ahmed can reveal the finished design.
ها هو نفس طبق الاصل. هاي ها الرسمه اللي عطاونا من الاداره ها هو طبق الاصل. يعني كاينين جوج ها الرسمه اللي عطاونا من الاداره احنا خدمنا عليها. فهمتيني؟ كي كتشوف هذا الرسمه هنا اللي كاينه في البلان وما هنا كاينه.
The final price of a mosaic like this is the sum of several factors, including the number of pieces and their shape.
This is the average, normal 36 pieces. The shape of it is very square, so the price of it is very affordable. Unlike if we go here, which is made of stars and cross. There are 36 pieces by 36, so 36 pieces here also, but the price of this is 4 times the price of the other one because of the shape.
Adil also considers the size of the tiles within a design. Smaller pieces are not as simple to chisel by hand. The smaller the tiles, the more expensive the design will be.
There are areas where you have a square foot that can have 64 pieces, 128 pieces, 360 pieces versus 36 pieces. So if you have one that costs $10 per square foot, the other one might cost 10 times, $100 per square foot.
The price increases further for more complex designs.
This tile has an interlace. The interlace is automatically double the price. So if you have a $10 square foot, with the interlace it's $20.
Centuries ago, Zellige tiles were reserved for royal palaces. Today, they've become synonymous with Moroccan design. You'll find them covering walls, floors, and fountains across Fez.
When we talk about Morocco and Moroccan architecture, the first thing comes to mind is Zellige.
But its influence goes beyond Morocco. Demand has grown in the US, especially in recent years, as notable designers like Kelly Worsler incorporate Zellige into their own work. But the way some are using the tiles is different. Rather than mosaics, they're creating monochromatic backsplashes. Part of the appeal of using just one color of Zellige is that it appears ombre when multiple tiles come together, thanks to their subtle variation in shade. But while Zellige becomes more popular overseas, Adil struggles to find young people locally he can trust with the trade.
This is more of a living art, but it's also a dying tradition. Nowadays, people are not patient as much as in before. If you look at the people who used to work in this trade, they are very calm, they are very peaceful, they have inner peace. Nowadays, we find extreme hardship to train and adopt people who can carry this kind of tradition as a Zellige artisans.
الانسان اي عمل من هذا كيخصو يعطيه الحق ديالو. اي عمل يمشي الانسان يقوم به تيخصو يعني يعطيه الحق ديالو. الصنعه الانسان الا بغى مثلا يملكها ولا شي حاجه راه تيخصو يعطيها حقها ويعطيها الوقت ديالها باش كيكسب واحد المهارات. ومع الطولان ديال الحياه ديالو هو محدو، هو تيخدم، هو تيتعلم. راه ماشي المعلم تيتسمى راه معلم، ديما تيبقى تيتعلم، الحياه ديالو كلها ديما تيبقى يتعلم.
The quality of Zellige depends on the hand that makes it. Preserving it means finding more artisans like Ahmed, willing to spend decades learning the craft behind this signature Moroccan design. One way to make shea butter involves pounding and grinding dry shea nuts by hand. Another way requires two people to push a lever, as a cold press machine turns shea nut oil into a creamy, pale yellow butter. Regardless of the way it's done, producing shea butter is tedious work, and depending on how it's made, it can cost over $50 a kilo. But this isn't just any shea butter. This is East African shea butter, the most expensive version of the commonly known product. So what makes East African shea butter different? And why is it so expensive? When someone hears shea butter, it's likely they think of the West African variety. But in East Africa, a different kind of shea nut grows, a subspecies called nilotica. The West African paradoxa tree is farmed, so it grows more abundantly. But nilotica isn't typically planted. It grows in the wild in East African countries like Uganda and Sudan. East African shea butter can cost more than double the West African alternative. That's because it's easier to spread and absorbs quickly into the skin.
This is our nilotica. Very low melting point. Like you see, when I spread it easily melts. And within a few minutes, it will have sunk into my skin pores. But when we come to our West African shea butter, when you spread, this is how it turns out. It will remain on top because of the waxy texture.
That makes nilotica more desirable for cosmetics companies, which use it for butters, oils, and soaps. And according to Lucy, this is one of the reasons demand for East African shea butter has grown both locally and abroad. In Uganda, nilotica producers are trying to meet the growing demand. Akello and her peers have been harvesting shea fruits since 5 a.m. They're part of the Corner Adware Moya Women's Group, a self-help group for women in Uganda. In Uganda, shea producers are primarily organized women's groups like this. They start their day early so they can pick the best fruits before other groups come. Akello and the other harvesters pick the fruits off the ground once they've already fallen. Then they remove and eat the fruit to reveal the shea nut. They eat it because they won't need it to make the butter, and it's delicious. Quality control starts here, with only the best shea nuts moving on to processing. These are grade A nuts, which are whole, undamaged, and untouched by insects. The nuts are then dried in the sun for a few days to reduce moisture. Next, they're carefully cracked, and the kernels are dried again for 2 weeks. Now Akello can make the shea butter. It's usually done one of 2 ways, by hand or by machine, both requiring heavy manual labor. Making shea butter by hand is an intensive process. After the nuts dry the second time, producers heat ash over a fire for 30 minutes. Then they roast the shea nuts in the ashes for another 45 minutes, stirring constantly. This helps prevent mold and deactivates free fatty acids, or FFAs, which are harmful to the body. But they have to be careful. Too much heat could lead to a dark oil with high, rather than deactivated, FFA levels. Then the women spread the nuts on the ground to cool off. Producers grind the nuts 3 times. They take turns pounding, then muddle the mixture further between rocks. And finally, refine the mixture in a mill. This creates a paste, which they pour into hot water. Here, the oil they need for the butter separates from the paste.
Teddo nien kayini kerikeni oni boli yikenu kitiene e kayin pe te beru rubu kayin pe beru rubu nye we ko chi we ko nyore ti yuti chukene ti rubu wa ko mo mer ti bera tik ka mo mer bera tik pe shamer dang pe shatte.
The oil is removed and packaged for sale locally, where a kilo costs over $5. It's mainly used for cooking, but locals also use it on their skin. And while it's still pricier than West African shea butter, this heat-processed butter is a more affordable alternative to cold-pressed Nilotica. 1 kilo of cold-pressed East African shea butter can reach $12 in Uganda. And when exported, it's over 4 times that price. That's because cold-pressed shea butter is more refined. It's the cleanest way to extract the oil, which preserves the nut's properties. After harvesting, drying, and grinding the shea nuts, producers place them in cloth bags and load them into a cold-press machine. They've had this machine since 1997. To use it, 2 people need to push each side of the lever in a circle, pressing and releasing the oil from the fat in the shea nuts. When left to rest, the oil hardens into shea butter. From nut to butter, the whole process can take 3 weeks. Today, producers prefer the cold press method because they can make bigger batches of high-quality shea butter. It can also enhance some of the butter's most desired properties. Studies of Nilotica have found that it has significantly higher oleic acid content than West African shea butter. It also has lower stearic acid content, which contributes to the softness of the butter.
This is the West African shea butter with a high melting point, and when it solidifies, it's really hard.
Harder textures are more difficult to integrate into cosmetics. Lucy says that's why Nilotica has the upper hand in cosmetics. Her American buyers prefer it because it absorbs faster into the skin. But Nilotica has other special properties.
The demand at the moment is growing because of these contents, the olein, vitamin E, and then it has antioxidants that make it easy, especially for cosmetics. It has to have a healing factor within it.
This growing demand is being met with limited supply.
The supply is a little lower because the number of producers is still a bit low.
The shea tree fruits only once a year, and producers are still figuring out how to bulk their harvests. And while some efforts are underway to farm more shea trees, the nuts are primarily harvested in the wild, limiting producers further. Then there's deforestation. According to the Ugandan National Forest Authority, the country has lost 63% of its tree cover in the past 25 years. Locals use the wood for charcoal, firewood, and timber. But Nilotica producers hope that as demand continues to grow and locals learn more about Nilotica's value, they'll work to preserve the trees, and in turn, scale up production of East African shea butter.
I believe if the marketing strategies are improved, we shall have more sales, more producers, and the more the buyers, of which the buyers are already out there.
Making authentic Tyrian Purple dye starts here, with extracting a murex snail gland. It takes nearly 45 kilograms of these snails to produce a single gram of pure Tyrian purple extract. It's a painstaking and pungent process. And the result? This single gram of dye that can fetch nearly $3,000. By comparison, 5 grams of a synthetic version sells for under $4. Tyrian purple can be used to dye clothes or create paints. In the ancient world, it was so rare that only royalty could afford to wear clothes dyed with it. Even today, at such an astronomical price, Tyrian purple pigment is mostly a collector's item. So, what makes real Tyrian purple so hard to make, and why is it so expensive? This is Mohamed Ghassan. He's been making Tyrian purple dye in his home in Tunisia for 15 years. Today, Ghassan is one of a handful of producers in the world bringing this ancient dye back to life. Ghassan learned how to make this dye through an excruciating process of trial and error. Because there's no instruction manual, he reconstructed the techniques he uses from 1st century texts.
Oh my God, I must say that I have gone through a lot of failures. The historical texts about the process of making Tyrian purple are very rare and are quite vague, so you have to start everything from scratch and learn everything on your own.
To make the extract, Ghassan must navigate a complex process, and it's this extensive labour that accounts for much of the final price. The part of the murex snail that contains the pigment is called the hyperbranchial gland.
The good thing is that the gland is located right under the shell, which helps a little bit in the extraction.
It's the only part of the snail used to make Tyrian purple, and each gland contains only a few drops of pigment. But before he can extract the gland, Ghassan has to wash, scrub, and sort the snails by size.
You don't really want all of this mud and sand to interfere with the dye when you crush the shell and expose the gland. So this is the first step, and it's a very important step. You really have to clean your snails very, very well.
Ghassan can now extract the gland from the clean snails. If he hammers each shell too lightly, it'll take too long. But if he hits it too hard, he'll crush the gland. It took Ghassan 2 years to learn how to do this efficiently.
And of course, the snail is not wasted, then it will be cooked for dinner. Everything is basically recycled.
To make the extract, Ghassan first macerates the fresh glands in cold water and lets them ferment in an airtight container. Once the glands release their colorant, Ghassan gently washes and filters the mixture to separate the dye from the flesh. This is the first of 6 separate rounds of purification necessary to make a pure Tyrian purple extract. Now Ghassan can dry the pigment mixture. He applies it to a sheet of glass and lets it dry under the sun. He uses glass because it won't absorb any of the valuable pigment.
So these glands have been drying for 3 days. They are half dry now. They're still malleable, as you can say. This is the pure colorant, or more or less pure.
Once the pure colorant mixture is dried, he scrapes it off the glass with a razor, making sure to get every last bit.
And the whole process, from the liquid colorant up until the dried pure powder, the whole mass will have lost at least 98% of its weight.
The dry pigment is now purified 5 more times in a grinding and sieving process to remove any detritus. The nearly 100 pounds of murex snails are finally transformed into 1 gram of pure Tyrian purple extract. And acquiring enough snails is another challenge, an expensive one. Ghassan can spend hundreds of dollars sourcing the snails he needs for his dye. That's because finding these snails requires experienced fishers. One of the fishers Ghassan works with is Salim Ben Milad. He harvests murex snails from Solomon Beach. Like Ghassan, Salim and his team have perfected their technique over time.
بالطبيعة لهنا صعيب تحديد المواقع برشا تحت الماء، راهو البحر كبير برشا كما تعرف البحر وكبر ويلزمك تعرف البقايع وتقمر يعني وتشد في مخك. وحتى في الأحجار يعني تحت البحر تحت الماء فما أحجار معين يحبوا.
It can take Salim 4 hours to find the right snails, or he can dive for a whole day to no avail.
بالطبيعة أهم حاجة احنا يعني في خدمتنا إنه يبدأ المناخ باهي يعني وطقس مزيان احنا نقولوا وراكح، ويبدأ الرؤية في الماء يعني تحت الماء باهية يعني واضحة.
The bloodmouth snail is particularly difficult to catch and requires Salim to dive 15 meters deep, which makes it more expensive. And if the weather is consistently bad, the price goes up even more. Sometimes, conditions force Salim and his team to go a whole month without fishing, but it's out of their control.
اللي يطلبوا غسان للبوغرنو هذا اللي خرجنا منه كما اللي شفنا منه طاول.
It's dangerous for the snails too, which are highly sensitive to climate change. Since the early 1970s, the population of murex snails has steeply declined due to temperature changes in the water and overharvesting.
We have to be very cautious not to be engaged in overharvesting, to make sure that the small specimens are put back into the sea to preserve the species. So this is why it takes a lot of time.
And careful management of the snail population is vital, as Ghassan and his divers attempt to revive Tunisia's thousands-year-old dye-making tradition. Ghassan doesn't use all the fresh snails to make extract. He reserves some to dye fabric directly. This time, he mixes the snail glands with water and a reducing agent and lets them ferment. The mixture goes from a colourless liquid to green before it turns purple. Finding the right pH balance in this step is crucial. If it's too acidic, the wool may burn, and if it's too basic, it may cause the wool to felt.
So now we're just monitoring the pH. It's about 8, which is perfect.
This is also the moment when the soluble dye is the most light sensitive. Ghassan must cover the dye vat immediately to avoid too much exposure to light. Too much light can turn the dye from purple to blue, destroying a week's worth of work. When the material has soaked for the appropriate amount of time, Ghassan lifts the vat lid, exposing the mixture to light and air. This allows the mixture to oxidize.
And this is how the color will gradually start to develop.
But one round of vat dyeing won't always do the trick. Like with this silk scarf.
It took me like 8 months to produce, and it required like 800 pounds of fresh snails. And this is still not completed.
And it's not always guaranteed that the color will come out the same shade.
Historically speaking, there isn't a single hue or shade of Tyrian purple. It's a range of shades that ranges from the color of clotted blood to the color of red purple.
This range is the result of mixing 3 different subspecies of murex snails. Hexaplex trunculus, which produces a violet blue colour, Bolinus brandaris, which secretes the colour of clotted blood, and the bloodmouth, or Stromonita hemastoma, which releases a rich red-purple colour. Tyrian purple dye dates back to the Bronze Age and is named after the Phoenician city of Tyre. Some historians believe it was produced as early as the 21st century BC. Ancient civilizations from Phoenicia to the Carthaginian and Roman empires prospered by producing and trading this dye. One of the production sites was Menings on the island of Jerba, which is now an archaeological site.
لأنها مادة ثمينة جدا، وبما أنها مادة ثمينة فقد قرر الأباطرة الرومان في بداية الإمبراطورية أن لا يقع استعماله إلا من طرف الوجهاء حتى يقع التفريق بين الأشخاص.
A text from the 4th century states that a single pound of Tyrian purple dye costs 3 pounds of gold. But production of this dye came to a screeching halt in the 15th century after the fall of the Byzantine Empire.
دراسة الزيت والزيتونة في أفريقيا الشمالية في القديم، ثم دراسة الأرجوان، هذا صنع الأرجوان المتاجرة به، والرخام إلى آخره، كل ما هو علاقة بالتجارة والموانئ.
Ali says he's grateful that Ghassan is reviving this culturally valuable dye so Tunisians can reconnect with their ancestry. Ghassan learned about the dye at the age of 14 and was enthralled by its history in Carthage. Over a decade later, he found a murex snail on the shore, oozing purple.
My old passion for red purple came rushing from its deep slumber, and I really had this revelation. And this is how my adventure for reviving this legendary dye started.
Now, he hopes to ramp up his production, offering more shades of pigment.
Well, of course, my dream is to enlarge this project and to create an old-fashioned dye factory and to produce more. But as I said, the main concern should always be to preserve the species, because if there is no murex, there is no dye.
Frankincense and myrrh are perhaps best known for their biblical connotations. But this tree sap has been prized across the world for over 6,000 years. These fragrant incense pieces come from the Burseraceae family of trees and are found across the Horn of Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. But despite recent attempts to protect these trees, they could soon be headed for extinction. So what makes frankincense and myrrh so expensive? There are roughly 550 species of Burseraceae, a collection of trees often referred to as the incense tree family, recognisable for their flaking aromatic bark and fragrant sap. But true frankincense comes from only a small fraction of those species.
ኣብዚ ዓዲ ኣብ ኢትዮጵያ ናብ ካብ 6 ዓሌታት ዕጣን ኣለዎ ተባሂሉ ይሕሰብ ካብዞም 6 ዓሌታት ሓደ ትግራይ ዝርከብ ቦስዋሊያ ፓፕሊፌራ ዝበሃል ሳይንሳዊ መፀውዒ ዘለዎ ኣብ ዕዳጋ ዓለም ተቐባልነት ዘለዎ ዓሌት ዕጣን እዩ።
Frankincense is a milky white resin derived from boswellia trees, which are remarkable for their ability to grow in unforgiving conditions. In fact, these trees have been known to grow out of solid rock. Myrrh, on the other hand, is a reddish resin extracted from Commiphora trees. The process of extracting sap from boswellia and Commiphora trees is virtually identical. Incisions or taps are made in the bark of the tree, which create injury. The trees produce a gummy resin, like a scab, as a protection against the injury. The resin then hardens into teardrop pieces. More incisions are made at important intervals to continue the production of resin exudates.
መጀመሪያ መቐርን ነዚ ንዕልሞ ተዓሊም ትበሃል እዚኣ ካብኡ ካልኣይ ደሞ እዚኣ ቆሲለላ ቁሩብ መዓልቲ ምስ በሰለ ልዕሊ ድሕሪ 15 መዓልቲ እዚኣ ተልቃ ቅንፍሪት ትበሃል ካብኡ ሜስካ ድሕሪ 15 መዓልቲ ምስ ብተመሳሳሊ ተልቃ ሳልስየን ተባሂላ ትፅዋዕ ተወሰነ ግን ዕጣን ግን ኣለዎ ይወፃ የተወሰነ ኣሪና ነጠረቐምና ንእኮ ካብኡ ብድሕሪ ሜስ ድሕሪ 15 መዓልቲ ድማ ራብዓየን ተባሂሉ ይፅዋዕ ተወሰነ ይእረዮ ካብኡ እንደገና ተደጋጋሚ ከም በ15 ይዝፈላለ
The resin granules collected from the trees must be separated into different grades. First grade A frankincense is clear, white and without impurities. Smaller pieces of the same high quality granules are separated within a sieve and classified as first grade B frankincense. The grades gradually deteriorate based on the size and the amount of impurities, such as bark infused into the resin. Low quality frankincense is mainly sold for local market consumption, whereas grades 1, 2, 3 and 4 are exported.
ጽቡቕ ሙዚቅ ቀዳማይ ይባሃል እዚ ብድርጅኡ ውን ቀዳማይ እዩ ብዋግኡ ውን ዝሐሸ ዋጋ እዩ ዘለዎ ማለት እዩ ተቐሚጥና ያዘልና ተርቢልና ያዘናስ በቃ ዋግኡ ውን ቀዳማይ እዩ እዚ ዝለዓለ ዋጋ ኣለዎ ቀዳማይ ይባሃል ማለት እዩ ካብ 15000 ንገዝኦ እዚ 15000 ቅርሺ 800 ብዘይባቱ ንገዝኦ ዝዓዲ ማለት እዩ
That means that at wholesale, this sack of first grade A Ethiopian frankincense is worth about $430. Frankincense and myrrh have been burnt as incense for thousands of years, and both are deeply ingrained in religious ceremonial burnings. In fact, it's estimated that the Roman Catholic Church alone still uses an estimated 50 metric tons of frankincense a year. Frankincense and myrrh were some of the most highly prized commodities in ancient civilizations, and became the driving force behind the creation of the incense trade routes, a vast network of major land and sea passageways dating back to 300 BC that linked the Mediterranean to luxury goods from the south. At the height of their use, these routes allowed the transport of approximately 3,000 tons of incense every year, hauled by camels. Today, alongside its medicinal and cosmetic uses, frankincense has found a surge in popularity as an essential oil, which in its purest form can be sold for as much as $6,000 per litre. Frankincense essential oil alone generated more than $190 million in 2018, and that's expected to exceed $406 million by 2028. But with so much money to be made from damaging a tree, the tapping process, which should happen only 2 or 3 times a year, is under threat not only from environmental dangers such as wildfires, but also from local untrained tappers. It can sometimes take decades for these trees to start producing resin, so the sustainability of the species relies on injuring the tree without killing it.
Unfortunately, the harvesting process of frankincense is very damaging to the tree. So every time people go there and make wounds and then collect the sap, that doesn't give enough time to rest for the tree and heal itself. So one of our findings is this tree is really under a threat.
The International Union for Conservation of Nature categorised the Boswellia sacra species as near threatened over 20 years ago, and the lack of overharvesting laws in some countries means that protecting Boswellia trees in such remote areas is virtually impossible. Experts who surveyed ageing Boswellia papyrifera trees in North Africa suggested that most hadn't produced a young tree in half a century.
بزفقد تلحص قد حركين كاجل أو حمشة 10 عامات كود أو دخل تخلي تطفخ عازق تخلي أفليس كون كنت قوة يتخل تخيل كون قريت كون كنت قوة يتخل بتفطروا بعنا على زخيت تخل سلسلة هنا تحرع عوي تلقى غازل ليه تناي محضر وأنت ما ناي مانجمنت تناي وأنت تطعم كارلجن نبزح زمانات كتأكل الزمانات ناتطعم على المزعت أني سكح هذا كله زوله قل كعت أني روزت أخاوي تتكعل هذا ورع أخاوي توصيلنا إذا نايتم بين كاوي توصيلنا.
Almost everyone at this market in Lagos, Nigeria, is here to buy stockfish. A coveted source of protein, it sells for $65 per kilogram, 7 times as much as other popular fish like croaker. But no one in Nigeria can actually produce this unique dried cod. The fish comes from thousands of miles away in Norway, where entire operations are dedicated to supplying the stockfish demand in Nigeria.
It's 99.9% for Nigeria.
A full drying rack like this is worth over $500,000. But because the supply from Norway is volatile, prices fluctuate, and sellers here in Nigeria have no control over how much fish gets here. So, how did stockfish first connect these two economies? And why is it so expensive?
We add our stockfish. The stockfish is very important to Nigerian cuisine because of the texture and flavor it gives to the dish, especially when you want to have that local smell, local aroma to your food.
This is the fishing village of Henningsvær in Lofoten, Norway. It's the ideal location for drying stockfish. Cod migrates here at the start of the winter. After it's caught, the fish is graded by size and tied to be hung on racks, heads and bodies separately. The weather here is cold, dry, and reaches -10 to -15 degrees Celsius with wind chill. It's so cold that there are no insects that could eat the fish, but not cold enough to freeze the fish. And it dries the fish so much that after a few weeks, not even birds are interested in it anymore. These racks have the capacity for as much as 4,000 metric tons of stockfish.
It's a way of conservation. You know, the yield is 23%, so that means that we take out all the water. It's a way of preserving the proteins.
Exposed in the freezing wind, it takes 3 months for cod to fully dry and become stockfish. Once that happens, stockfish can be stored for up to 3 years, making it an extremely valuable resource. This is a longer method than using salt or artificial dryers, which can dry cod in a week, but the long wait pays off. Companies like Nora's buy fresh cod for 52 kroner, a little less than $5 per kilogram from fishers. Once dried, its bulk price is around 150 kroner per kilogram. In Nigeria, it won't be sold in kilograms, but in 30 kilogram bags.
These heads, after 2 months approximately, we can take it indoor after dry it, and we press it into 30 kilo jute bags and ship in 40 feet containers, and it all goes to Nigeria, yes.
Up until 60 years ago, the word stockfish meant little to nothing in Nigeria. But after the Nigerian Civil War killed more than 1 million people, mostly of starvation in the late 60s, everything changed. Among the emergency supplies other countries sent to Nigeria to combat the famine, Norway sent stockfish. While Norwegians still eat it in restaurants now, almost 100% of the stockfish produced in Norway is headed to Nigeria, especially for home cooking. In 2015, Nigeria imported $8.94 million worth of stockfish from Norway.
No, this call from Norway. We don't have challenge selling stockfish when we import it. And we sell as much as we bring.
Nonso is a stockfish dealer. He's spent 20 years in the business, going from retailing to dealing directly with imports. He sells his stockfish at the Otto White Sand Market in Lagos, Nigeria.
Stockfish, it comes in this first species. So there is the head aspect of it, which is also into 3 types. There's one that comes with jaw, there's one that comes without jaw. There's also type of different hairs. So the same way it is different, the prices are different. So into that meat, there are also 2 types of the meats. There are the one without skin and the one with skin. Then aside from that one too, there is also the body, the long one. That one also is more expensive. And even in that body, there are up to 4 different types.
The hot and humid climate makes it impossible for stockfish to be dried here, so importing it is the only option. The stockfish takes 6 weeks to get to Nonso from Norway.
A bag of body here is above $500 and above 300,000. Then the main body, the long one, is up to 800,000 to 900,000 here, which is almost close to $1,000 above.
But those prices will not be the same tomorrow. Prices fluctuate depending on the season, and because it's a more convenient trade currency than Norwegian kroner, prices are set in US dollars. They depend on the naira to dollar exchange rate of the day. And even then, there are 2 different exchange rates: the official one, set by the Central Bank of Nigeria, and the black market rate. Black market rates, although unofficial, often give a better picture of the real market conditions.
Most of us end up going for black market because you can be in a queue for dollar for months.
In Nigeria, these 2 exchange rates are very different. Which one you pick to sell your stockfish can make or break a business like Nonso's.
That's a major challenge in every business in this country. The restriction and access to gold. The difference between government rates and black market is over 100. That's a lot of money. So it makes the business difficult and also makes it expensive for consumers. So it's a very big challenge. But for now, for what dealing with this now, we don't have much option. We have to continue our business.
In 2021, to encourage local fish farming, the Nigerian government added stockfish to a list of over 40 items that importers have to buy with actual US dollars, not naira converted into the same amount. For Nonso, this made trading stockfish even more challenging.
15 years ago, A container of stockfish could be around 7-8 million. But today, a container of stockfish was worth between $75,000 to $80,000. In current black market range, prices are about from 17 million to 50 million. Because of the challenges of accessing forests through central bank normal rents, a lot of people have left the business.
The rise in energy costs has also made the operations in Norway more expensive to run, and that also reflects on the final price at the market here.
Because the people go for which one they can afford. So now they are being a method that instead of allowing to be there to spoil, we now start slashing. So when you move around the market, you'll see people slashing the stockfish to a smaller size that people can afford.
I really can't place a time frame to how long I've been cooking stockfish. I grew up knowing stockfish. I learned to use stockfish also in cooking the local dishes, the local delicacies, especially our soup and stews. Here is our seafood okra in all its beauty. How lovely it looks. First of all, you feed with the eyes. The burst of flavors, the taste, all combining to give this wonderful aroma.
Back in Norway, the Nigerian market is too important to lose.
And it's funny because we have been trying to sell to other countries these products also, and every time we think we try to found a new market, then we find out that it was really the Nigerians living in the Netherlands or England or the US. So it's always the Nigerians who like this.
Argan oil can cost as much as $300 per litre, making it the world's most expensive edible oil. Just 20 years ago, however, the production of argan oil was isolated to local villages in Morocco, with international sales virtually non-existent. But since then, the formation of women-run cooperatives has transformed the production into a billion-dollar industry. So why has argan oil suddenly gained such popularity, and what makes it so expensive? Argan oil is predominantly used in high-end cosmetic products and Moroccan cuisine. The oil comes from the seed of the argan tree, native only to the narrow strip of semi-desert between Morocco's Atlantic coast and the Atlas Mountains. The Amazigh people of North Africa have been using the argan seeds for centuries, and the methods for creating this costly oil haven't changed in years.
الحالة الأولى ديال الإنتاج منين يعني كان دابا حنا كنجمعوا أفياش كنجمعوا هذا الحب ديال الأرغان كنجمعوه ملي تيكمل النضج ديالو يعني في الأول كيكون على هذا اللون هذا كيكون خضر ما يمكنش لينا أننا نجو مثلا نضربوه بالعصا ولا نجنيوه في الشجرة كنخليوه حتى كيطيح في الأرض وكيرجع في واحد اللون اللي هو بني.
Once collected, the argan fruits are sun-dried before being peeled and depulped by hand to remove the fleshy outer layers. The leftover argan nut then needs to be cracked to retrieve the oil-rich kernel inside.
وهذه كتبقى هي المرحلة الصعيبة ماشي سهلة ماشي أي واحد يجي ويهرس هاد الحبة هذه لأن خص تكون عندك واحد التقنية في الطريقة ديال التهريس ديالها باش تحاول تحافظ على هاد اللوزة ما خصهاش تهرس لينا باش يعني نحصلوا على 1 لتر ديال الأرغان تقريبا كناخذوا واحد 40 كيلو من هاد الحب هذا باش اللي كيعطينا تقريبا واحد 20 كيلو من هاد النواة.
The next stage is grinding, which is often also done by hand.
يعني كنطحنوا اللوزات ديال الأرغان بهاد الطريقة التقليدية اللي لقينا جدادنا ومعروفة في التراث المغربي ديالنا. هاد الطريقة هذه كتاخذ منا واحد الوقت يعني باش نحصلوا على 1 لتر ديك كيخصك تقريبا ساعتين ولهذا فالتطورات وكنقدروا يمكن الا كانت عندنا شي طلبيه كثيره كنستعملوا الاله يعني واحد الوقت قليل يعني في 5 دقائق تقدر توجد تعطيك 1 لتر ولا 2 لتر. بالنسبه لزيت ارغان هو يعني ماشي بحال الزيوت الاخرى كيبقى واحد الزيت اللي غاليه كيف ما كيسميوها الذهب الاحمر يعني زيت غاليه بزاف وكتطلب في الانتاج ديالها واحد المجهود كبير. يعني بالنسبه لواحد المراه الا غتوجد لك 1 لتر ديال زيت ارغان كيطلب منها تقريبا واحد 24 ساعه.
The leftover pulp removed from the fruit is sold as animal feed, particularly for goats, who are intrinsically linked to the argan tree. In some areas, it's tradition to allow goats to climb the trees to freely feed on the fruits. Argan kernels are then collected from their excrement, saving the laborious work of cracking open the nuts manually. But nowadays, in most argan forestries, this peculiar site is merely used as a tourist attraction.
هذيك الزيت يعني ملي دارت عليها التحاليل تلقاو بانها غير صالحه للاكل. اذا الماعز عنده يعني كيكون واحد المضره بالنسبه لهذاك. والماعز هو جزء من المنطقه والسياح يعني تعجبهم بزاف انهم يجيو يشوفوا المعزه فوق الشجره ديال ارغان.
Traditionally, Amazigh women, who until 1956 required the man's permission to leave their homes, made argan oil primarily for culinary purposes, using methods passed down through generations. This artisanal oil was occasionally sold on the roadside in recycled bottles for as little as $3 per litre.
Et donc, on s'est aperçu en fait que les femmes qui préparaient cette huile d'une façon artisanale, elles avaient une peau vraiment très douce et pas de rides du tout. Mais on n'avait aucune preuve scientifique.
Zubida Sharouf first studied the argan tree for her PhD in the late 1980s, when the species was in dangerous decline. After conducting scientific research to support the moisturizing benefits of argan oil on hair and skin, Sharouf planned to transform the environmental problem into an economic solution.
L'objectif n'était pas de garder ces résultats sur les tiroirs à l'université, mais sortir sur le terrain, organiser la filière, ces femmes qui n'étaient pas organisées du tout, qui produisaient de l'huile d'argan de façon traditionnelle chez elles. Et donc, c'était très difficile, c'était quelque chose de nouveau. Elles ne savaient pas ce que c'est qu'une coopérative. Ensuite, ils ne sont jamais sortis de chez elles. Et donc, quand même, on a commencé par ces 16 femmes. Et dès que les autres ont vu ce que ça a donné pour cette première coopérative, donc il y a eu beaucoup de femmes qui sont venues nous voir, qui voulaient aussi s'organiser en coopérative et profiter de la commercialisation de l'huile d'argan.
Sure enough, the rapid rise in popularity of argan oil not only brought profit to the region, but also revitalized an entire ecosystem. The newfound respect for the value of argan trees ensured stability for the species, and in turn, the surrounding wildlife and community reaped the benefits. The argan tree, known locally as the Tree of Life, provides food, shelter, and protection from desertification, and its deep roots prevent soil erosion, allowing vegetated grass to grow for grazing livestock. It's estimated that up to 90% of the economy in this region is owed to the argan tree.
Il y a pratiquement 3 millions de personnes qui subsistent de l'arganerie parce qu'il fournit beaucoup de journées de travail pour les populations locales. Rien que la seule extraction de l'huile, elle fournit pratiquement 1 million de journées de travail. Mais le rôle le plus important, c'est le rôle environnemental. L'arganier est vraiment le dernier rideau vert au niveau du désert.
In just one generation, the international market for argan oil has risen from just 200 litres to 4,000 metric tonnes in 2019. By 2025, the state's ambition is to sell over 10,000 metric tonnes. To facilitate this increase, the area for producing the oil has expanded more than 100 miles south of Aswara and is due to expand north. As with any costly ingredient, argan oil products are often adulterated. Both cosmetic and culinary argan oil is often labelled as pure, despite the undisclosed percentage of Argania kernel oil being mixed with a host of chemical compounds. And cheaper, mechanically extracted oil has begun to appear on the market, for as little as $22 a litre, threatening the stability of the local cooperatives. However, some cosmetic giants such as L'Oreal have committed to fair trade programs to help ensure the stability of their argan oil and the preservation of the forest's biodiversity. With the help of the cooperatives, the traditional skills held by the Amazigh women have created a booming industry. But even though this income has granted some financial independence in a male-dominated society, the women normally make less than $220 a month, below Morocco's recommended national minimum wage. With the argan oil industry predicted to continue its growth, the prosperity of the Amazigh women remains to be seen.
On day 1, harvesters cut out these river reeds. And in 8 days, after drying, burning, and filtering, the reeds will produce one of the most expensive salts in the world. Just 1 tablespoon of river reed salt costs about $1 in Kenya. Compare that to the 4 cents it costs locals for the same amount of sea salt. So how do producers make salt from river reeds? And why is it so expensive? River reed salt, or chumvi ya kienyeji, is made from the reeds of the machua plant that grow along the Nzoia River. Once the salt is extracted, it's typically sold in small quantities to chefs and luxury hotel owners in Kenya and abroad. Buyers describe its saltiness as powerful and umami-like.
I buy the river reed salt because of, I will say, the magic in it. The texture is smooth. It is not rough or coarse. For those who have tasted umami from Japan, it tastes almost the same, but this one has more of a sharp taste. So when you're cooking with it, you won't use a lot of it.
Today, only the Bukuzu community in the village of Webuye continues the traditional process of making this rare salt by hand. This is the Nzoia River, and this is Andrew Wanyonyi Sikanga. Andrew and his sons harvest the reeds that grow along the riverbanks. Before they go out to harvest, Andrew starts the morning with a prayer. They pray for protection from the dangers they might encounter at the river, like snakes and crocodiles. To avoid coming into contact with them, Andrew and his sons need to harvest early.
Kwa sababu huwa nyoka zinatembea mchana kama mvua jua inakuja, lakini asubuhi baridi iko haitembei. Sasa tunaenda huko kwa sababu ya hiyo vitu bado ingali kwa mashimo.
Today, they're looking for ripe river reeds.
Vile iko hivi ni mrefu kuliko kama sasa hii ni kitoko. Tunalingana. Sasa hii iko na chumvi. Lakini bado changa, hakuna chumvi. Ndio sasa tunaangalia kwa urefu wa chumvi yenyewe. Ndio nilikuwa nasema 2 meters kwenda juu. Lakini kama iko hivi tunaiacha.
If the reed isn't at least 2 meters tall and the flowers at the top aren't wilted and nearly dried, the concentration of salt will be too low. Andrew hacks away at the ripe reeds, being careful not to uproot the plant or cut too close to the roots. That way, the reeds can regrow more quickly, and the roots can continue to spread onto other rocks. Only reeds with a high salt content make the effort worth it, because from them, Andrew can make enough salt to sell.
Alafu iko ni riski. Alafu saa zingine nini kikuja namna hivi, maji kikuja inakuja na uchafu, lakini kuja na miiba kama vile imekuwa hapa namna hivi. Hata ikifika hapa hivi usipochunga vizuri, ukianza kukata kumbe umeshika miiba alafu na kutunga. Au saa zingine unajikata hivi vile huyu amejikata hapa saa hii. Sasa hiyo ni changamoto ya hapa.
Though there was a mild injury, today's harvest was a good one. After a long day of navigating the waters of the Nzoia River, Andrew and his sons leave the riverbank with a lot of reeds.
Wa Februari. Sasa hii ndio tumepata na ingine pato ingali iko nyumbani. Tumefurahia leo. Hapa yote vile iko hivi nikichoma itaweza kuwa kama grams 200 hivi. Hapa itaweza kuwa vijiko grams 200, vijiko 20.
Those 20 tablespoons will sell for about $20. Now they can begin the long manual process of extracting salt. First, Andrew must dry the reeds. Drying reeds can take 4 days when the skies are sunny, but in cloudier weather, it'll take longer. To begin processing, he has to burn the reeds for 1 to 3 days. Once all the reeds turn to ash, Andrew places them in a large pot with drainage holes. Then he slowly adds water. The water filters through the ashes and holes, each drop collecting at the bottom. He pours those droplets through another filter and into an aluminum pan. Next, he places the pan over an open fire, where the solution is left to boil until the liquid evaporates. Finally, after a full day of work, Andrew is left with this wet, salty paste. The next day, he packs the paste into banana leaves and places them under hot ashes to dry. After 3 hours, the salt hardens. From reed to salt, the process takes at least 8 days. Andrew will sell the salt in the banana leaves. This is the same long process his family has practiced for generations.
Sasa hii miaka 20 na kwa kupata vile walikuwa wanatengeneza, baba wangu ndiye alikuwa anatengeneza, alafu nami nikajifunza kutoka kwa baba yangu mzazi.
It's believed the tradition began in the 17th century when the Bukusu people migrated eastward from Congo. At the time, areas in western Kenya were cut off from salt routes. So they set out to find a way to extract salt from these aquatic plants. Centuries later, the salt that was made out of necessity became a pricey commodity. At the market, this pack containing just 3 tablespoons of river reed salt costs about $3, and this larger pack, $7. It's likely to sell because local demand is high. Buyers know the intense work put into making this salt, so for them, the price is worth it. Although there aren't studies to confirm it, market sellers say that part of what keeps the salt in high demand locally is the belief it has special medicinal properties. But the most notable feature is its taste. In fact, Andrew's river reed salt won the title for most unique indigenous salt at an international gastronomy exhibition in Italy in 2014. Slow Food, one of the organizers of the exhibition, established a presidium in 2009 for Kenya's river reed salt to drive more demand for the product. But fulfilling that demand would require more supply, which is difficult when production is so limited. One of the biggest threats to river reed salt production is climate change. According to Slow Food, the growing population in Kenya has led to deforestation. Indigenous trees along the Nzoia River have long held soil particles together and provided shade, keeping temperatures stable. But the loss of these trees, along with higher temperatures, unstable river levels, and landslides, has contributed to the loss of river reeds. Andrew tried growing the reeds with other water sources, but couldn't get the same outcome.
Hapo hata mbeleni nilikuwa nimekumbuka hiyo, alafu nikapandako huku nyumbani. Na vile nilipanda nyumbani ikakua, ikafika mahali namna hivi. Na nikileta maji nyingine ya kunyunyiza inaenda chini. Lakini nikichukua maji ya Nzoia inafurahi, inaenda juu. Lakini tu mradi maji ya Nzoia peke yake. Nimefanya hiyo utafiti, maji nyingine inakata.
In addition to conservation efforts like replanting indigenous trees, Slow Food is working on creating more marshy areas for the reeds to grow.
Since the river reed salt really does well with the waters from the river, we were thinking that if we try a little bit to divert some of these water from the river and have a marshy area plus some of the rocks, we can actually try to see whether we can increase the number of reeds, because I know that as the people continue knowing about this particular salt, there will be high demand.
This project, along with increased commercial exposure of river reed salt, hopes to help producers like Andrew and his sons keep their work alive for generations to come.
This massive 50-kilogram Nile perch is a rare catch for these Ugandan fishers. But it's not the fish meat that'll make them the most money. It's this balloon-like internal organ known as a fish maw or a swim bladder. Dried fish maws can sell for up to $800 a pound, but older maws like this one from a large slate cod croaker are valued as high as $4,000 for a single piece.
Wegamba esinga obaka nga mene pizza tejja naye kati yafuuka gold kyobola lwaki sigiriya.
Fishers sell it to Chinese markets around the world where people eat it for its health benefits and supposed anti-aging properties. But the supply chain in China is facing a big problem. Due to overfishing in Chinese waters, connoisseurs are now looking abroad to places like Uganda for fish maw. The organ is so prized that smuggling and theft are rampant in the industry. So why is fishing for maw worth the risk? And why is it so expensive? Po Wing Hong Food Market in New York City's Chinatown has been selling fish maw ever since it first opened in 1980. Today it specialises in rare dried seafood delicacies. Sophia Sao runs this shop with her parents. She says that these days fish maw is so rare that they have to buy it in bulk as soon as it becomes available.
Usually we request a certain size and certain type of fish maw because we know what sells the best. And we usually maybe get 50% of what we request because the demand is so high.
Fish maw, or swim bladder, is an organ that enables fish to control their buoyancy. Fish maw is traditionally considered one of the 4 treasures of Cantonese cuisine, along with shark fin, abalone, and sea cucumber. Zhao Xiong, who has worked for Po Wing Hong for 10 years, supervises the dried seafood department. He's an expert on the 4 treasures.
係非洲嘅淡水鱸魚膠嚟嘅，一般嘅花膠咧係稍微有一種偏黃，跟住咧佢係有一種非常之半透明嘅咁樣一種狀態喺度，所以咧佢嘅年份咧越耐咧佢嘅花膠係越厚。 跟住咧，佢所含嘅膠原同埋蛋白質咧係非常之豐富，同埋咧佢所含咧各種嘅微生物咧、磷咧、鈣咧呢啲微生物特別豐富啲。
The store orders all of its fish maw from a USDA certified broker who works directly with traders and fishers in Southeast Asia, South America, and Africa.
Usually when we order fish maw, it's about 30 to 50 pounds per case, and general prices are between 4,000 to 8,000 depending on the quality of the fish maw.
They resell it for anywhere from $200 to $800 per pound, depending on the type and quality. The Chinese bahaba, or large yellow croaker, was a main source of fish maw for decades. But in 1989, the Chinese government designated it a Grade 2 state-protected species. And in 2006, the International Union for Conservation of Nature also assessed the fish as critically endangered. Today, the majority of fish maw is imported from other countries, including Uganda, where fishing for an invasive species called Nile perch on Lake Victoria has become a lucrative business for locals like Amber Francis. It's early morning on Kisima One Island in Jinja. Amber is packing up his bait and hooks and preparing his boat to set out on Lake Victoria. He's worked as a fisher here for the past 10 years. He says Nile perch sold for much cheaper when he first started, before there was demand for the bladders. The islands in the area around Jinja, like Kisima, are used as a base for the estimated 2,000 or so fishers in the area. While Ugandans don't typically eat fish maw themselves, Amber has tried it and loves it.
Yeah, we used to eat it and we enjoyed it a lot. Other people sometime back they used to throw them away. Not until they came to realize that it's tasty, it's good. That's when they started to consume it.
Amber says he can make around $4,000 a month selling fish maw to traders, depending on the size of his catch.
Each kilo, they can buy it at 25,000, only a kilo. When I get that one, which weighs like 10 kilograms, that's 250, which is a lot of money in Uganda.
But finding the biggest fish requires some special tricks and knowing where to look.
The weather right now is good for fishing, but in 2 to 3 hours, actually, the water will be rough.
He focuses on the deep water, and he baits his hooks with a live young catfish, known locally as ensuma. If the water is too cold, the ensuma can die instantly, and Nile perch won't go after dead fish. Each hook is demarcated with a bottle, so he knows which lines belong to him. Because these fish are so valuable, theft is also an issue on the lake.
Unfortunately, you go there, you find nothing, when everything was taken by those thieves. Yeah.
Once he's baited his lines, he leaves them in the water and returns to the island to rest until evening.
Now we are going to rest for some time, like 3 to 4 hours. After, we come back and check our hooks, what we have put there, to see whether there's Nile perch on it.
Amber says he typically catches 6 or 7 fish per day, usually all weighing under 20 kilograms. The biggest one he has ever caught was a massive 98 kilograms.
I feel good when it pulls me. Yeah, actually I enjoy it. It's like a game to me.
Today he caught only 6 fish, but the biggest one was about 30 kilograms.
Expected to go to get more than this. Yeah, actually it's a bad day to me.
The fishers don't remove the bladders themselves. Tomorrow, Amber will sell his fish directly to the trader, who hired him at the local market in Masese. Amber's boss is Hakim Magumba, who has been working in the fishing industry for about 23 years. He previously traded tilapia to buyers in Kenya, but he now works with Nile perch because it's much more profitable.
Because I fish because I need fish more. Because fish more is like gold to my side. You understand? We used to throw it back. We used to throw the bladder because it was no sense. We wanted that meat, but nowadays, money.
Hakim says he has 22 boats and 30 fishers like Amber working for him. Once they deliver the fish to him, they are weighed, sorted and priced based on their size.
This fish weighs 12 kilos. After weighing, we are going to cut it and see the bladder which is in it.
The bladders must be removed and cleaned by hand.
We sell it at the 500,000 Ugandan shillings.
The rest of the fish doesn't go to waste. Hakim sells it to the locals in Uganda, where it's a popular delicacy. The more will eventually make its way to Chinese exporters who dry it and ship it to Hong Kong and other locations worldwide. Hakim is just one of many traders in the area trying to make a living in Fishmore with competitors all around him.
We have like people from Kenya, people from TZ, their own competitors. Very many. Very many.
Aside from the competition, Hakim says one of the biggest challenges the fishers in Uganda face is run-ins with local authorities.
The guys who are in business of fishing, they don't have the license. So when you don't have license, you are caught with the soldiers.
Crime is also an issue on land, according to Hakim. He says some of his colleagues have been robbed while transporting their goods to Chinese buyers.
Theft is too much. Most on the roads when you're taking it to the Chinese.
And getting into the industry is costly. Not everyone can afford the initial investment of equipment, which includes a government-licensed boat, an engine, plus regulation hooks and bait.
Yeah, actually it requires a lot of capital, yeah, to deal in fishing Nile perch. Like me as a fisherman, just one boat I require like 15 million shillings.
Overfishing has already been detrimental to many fish species around the world. A large croaker in Mexico's Gulf of California called the totoaba is now in danger of extinction due to the fish maw trade. But this fish, often dubbed the cocaine of the sea, is still illegally trafficked into China. In April 2023, US Customs seized $2.7 million worth of totoaba fish maw hidden in a shipment of frozen fish fillets in Arizona. Even so, demand for fish maw is not slowing down. On a weekday morning at Po Wing Hong, the aisles are as busy as ever, with customers scouring the shelves for dried seafood products as soon as they open. While fish maw is more popular among the older generations, Sophia says younger people have started incorporating it into their diets as well.
I feel that nowadays a lot of younger people are eating fish maw because it reminds them of dishes that they have in the past, and it's a little bit of nostalgia. Also, they want to embrace their culture and relearn the dishes that are really traditional.
And that rare $4,000 fish maw they have on hand, it's so special to Po Wing Hong that it's not even for sale.
We keep it just as a keepsake. We just have it as part of our collection.
Today, Victor is climbing trees up to 40 feet high, equipped with a homemade axe, a rope, and his own bare feet, which he's using to reach something very valuable, the fruits that'll be turned into red palm oil. Standard palm oil, or palm kernel oil, is known for being quite cheap, but red palm oil can cost 3 times as much. When it's shipped to the US or the UK, it can sell for even more, up to $20 for a single litre.
Where they see person they fall, I know they fear if I don't climb up.
Workers like Victor face snakes and the risk of falling just to harvest this valuable fruit. But what makes red palm oil different from palm oil, and what exactly makes it so expensive?
This is what palm oil looks like. Our local palm oil. I actually prefer to cook with red palm oil because of the taste.
Red palm oil has a mildly floral flavour and a buttery texture.
Palm oil generally is used for our local food. All the time, all the time, all the time.
Here, in Ondo State, Nigeria, making this local favourite is a labour-intensive and artisanal process. Thousands of fleshy palm fruits are transformed into yellow-brown sludge and then red-orange oil over the course of a week. It all starts on oil palm plantations like this one in the village of Aye. Every few weeks, expert climbers are called in to harvest the palm husks. The trees here can be as high as 60 feet. Climbers like Victor don't wear any protective gear, relying on just handmade harnesses and axes to help them up the palm trees.
And this is our rope, and I think they cut it.
Victor makes new ropes with fresh palm fibres whenever he feels his current one isn't strong or tight enough. This is important because old rope can become brittle and snap.
And sometimes, some people they use their life. See my own now. With another people, they will see they use it. Don't sit now, it don't hold, and don't they break. You are the clown. Gentle, gentle, no rush. Use my ass. Go hook up for your itch.
It takes 3 years for oil palm trees to bear fruit, but once they do, they can be harvested year-round.
Sometimes they call 200. Well, if person won't learn this work, I feel teach them well. All these things, I know go green, make this rope grow up. Go clean and come out. Now, where I won't cut it now.
sweet now.
The biggest obstacle Victor faces once he's climbing is snakes.
Or if you carry your ass, say one cut, that snake go touch your rope and that person go fall.
The risk of falling has led some workers to stop climbing and instead help with collecting the palm husks from the safety of the ground.
I need a climb tree because before they climb this banga, as this banga they so danger deal. As if you climb, if you go there, you go see snake for up.
It's very difficult to separate the fresh fruit from the thick, spiky palm husks. So they're left out to dry. This time also allows the fruit to ferment, which elevates the oil's flavour. After 3 or 4 days, the fruits are ready to be dehusked. Randy and other workers use axes to break the husks and sift the fruits to separate them from dirt. They collect the fruit in large sacks and transport it to a processing site in the nearby village of Ireze. Randy delivers the palm fruits to his wife, Deborah, who is one of the many workers toiling away to transform the fruits into red palm oil. The sacks of fruit are dumped into buckets and large drums.
As it is so, for that one drum, in a better agree could they see 2 1. So like this, you don't ferment, sell like this. If you don't ferment it, like some people, if they sell like this, they say you don't rot, you don't rot you.
Water is added to the drums to boil the fruit.
I go pour water, but make the water not too much. I get up about what I tell the mayor water put. No, we know the test them. We are local, so we know the test any decoration. No, we know the hard chemical.
After 1 hour, the fruit is ready to be drained and taken to the miller.
Yeah, now inside this drum, they boil. See the water, it don't change. What would they do before? If they don't go cut them for farm, if we don't pick and finish, it gets more people we don't do by ourselves. We don't carry cement, do them very well. Now that they go, if they don't cook and finish, now there, they go the match with your legs.
But the mill still involves a significant amount of labour, as someone must manually load and empty the fruit. After the mill, it's time for another recently acquired machine, a hydraulic press. The fruit, which has been milled into a pulp, is pressed to release its oil. No kernel oil is released here because that would require the seeds to be dried and cracked. Some locals do produce kernel oil, but since it's more difficult to make without special machinery, it's not as common. While oil palms originated in West Africa, colonization led to the rapid expansion of oil palm plantations throughout Southeast Asia. Eventually, Southeast Asia took over the global palm oil industry, and as other oils also grew in popularity, West Africa never quite caught up. West Africa's rainy season, which typically lasts from May to October, is also an ongoing issue.
Rainy season, if rain fall, if you climb a tree, means maybe you don't plan, you want to kill yourself. Because you know good man, you go climb when rain fall, the pantry go they draw.
So when it's raining, no one is climbing the trees, which means the fruit often goes rotten. And thanks to climate change, the rainy season has been lasting longer, causing more damage. This decreases the already low supply of palm fruits and raises the price of red palm oil. In contrast, palm kernel oil plantations harvest on a massive scale and rely on heavy machinery for the bulk of their production.
But you get work, we dey suffer for this thing. Government, I no see government where come support me. I no get any support. I must say they suffer with my children, with my wife, with my friends.
Our engine, our mainly engine. We don't get money to buy big one or the one we go give us guarantee say this one we fit use and like 5 years we no go disturb us. So now it.
After enough oil has been collected in the large bowls underneath the press, workers carefully scoop the orange-red liquid into other bowls and buckets. The oil is poured into drums for a final boil. After 1 hour, the fire is put out and the oil is left to cool off. The finished oil is moved into buckets, then funneled into jerry cans. Deborah says some customers travel all the way from Lagos State, which is about 5 hours away by car, to buy her red palm oil.
Some people think I will do more than 15 kegs, 30 litre.
These kegs sell for $30 each. Although the price can change depending on the supply of palm fruits.
I know they appeal. Now I know they carry my oil and go market. I dey sell it for my house. I get plenty customer.
The price of red palm oil can also vary depending on location. A 4-litre bottle at a supermarket in a bigger city like Lagos can cost around $18, making it the same price or even cheaper than some imported vegetable oils. Thanks to Nigeria's volatile exchange rates. Meanwhile, the red palm oil that is exported outside of West Africa is exponentially more expensive, ranging from $15 to $20 for 1 litre in the US, and the cost may only be getting higher. Cooking oil prices have been on the rise thanks to weather-related supply shortages in countries like Argentina and Canada. The Russian invasion of Ukraine also cut the world off from the region's supply of sunflower oil and led Indonesia to ban some exports of its palm oil. All this raised the global price of cooking oils even higher. As a result, the local cost of red palm oil in Nigeria has also increased, but for many people, the price is worth the taste.
Our own, I believe in my own oil, you say, it better. The price, at the expense, say me, they don't tell me, say, don't they go up more, because they work, not the easy.
It can take 30 kilos of raw wool to make a single Moroccan rug. Women tie each knot by hand, 1 row at a time. Instead of using guides, they work from their imagination.
ملي كنديروا الزربية كنعبروا على المشاعر ديالنا وعلى الحياة ديالنا. كل زربية عندها قصة ديالها.
When sold online, authentic rugs can cost over $2,000, but the women who make them often receive the least profit. The most Fadma has sold a rug for? $600. Most of the profits are taken by middlemen who buy the rugs from artisans and sell them for several times more in big markets. Authentic rugs also compete with knockoffs made outside of Morocco.
لا ما فراسيس واش كاين شي زربيه تتقلد الزربيه ديال المغرب على برا حتى قلتيها ليا وملي سمعت هاد الخبر حسيت بشي نقصان.
Today, dozens of cooperatives are working together to fight for a fair wage. We went to Morocco to find out why these artisans struggle to earn a profit while the rugs are so expensive. Deep in the Atlas Mountains, there are thousands of artisans weaving rugs like this. They've been woven throughout Morocco for centuries by Amazigh tribes.
وهذا الشكل هذا راه صعيب بزاف وغاليين بزاف.
Fadma has been making rugs her whole life. She says weaving is much more than just a job.
ملي كنت انا صغيره كنجلس حدا امي تنشوف كيفاش تدير كيفاش تنج وكيفاش تدير الزربيه.
Her day starts with making bread. Besides weaving, the women here are responsible for childcare and household chores. Artisans use wool from local sheep, but there's a lot of work to do before this wool is ready to weave. Raw wool starts out like this. artisans carry the wool to a nearby river to wash it, removing any dirt or debris. Once the wool dries, artisans spin it into yarn. These large combs untangle the fibres in a process called carding. Artisans spin the wool 2 times, combining threads for a sturdier result. It's patient work, but Fatma says working together makes it more enjoyable.
كنتعاونوا بعضياتنا حيت كل وحده فينا لاش تعرف ما يمكن لك حيت صعيب ما يمكنلكش دير بوحدك العمليه الا تجمعنا تتولي واحد الفرحه عاوتاني وما كنحسوش بالتعب وبالخدمه كنخدموا بعضياتنا ونشطوا وناكلوا كنخدموا مزيان وكتجينا لقينا ديك الساعه راه ماشي بحال الا كنتي بوحدك.
These women are part of the Kasper Daznacht cooperative, one of around 50 in the region. Their aim is to help each other weave and to sell rugs directly, cutting out the middlemen.
صعيب دير التعاون يا ويني كتبغي شويه الصبر من بعد داك الشيء ديال الجرا وهذا تتولي نتيجه تفرح الا تجمعتي مع صحاباتك وهذا تيولي شويه الفرح.
Having several artisans is especially useful when weaving a large rug. They measure out the length and hammer 2 stakes into the ground. Artisans walk the yarn back and forth dozens of times to start the rug. The rest of the rug is woven into this base. From here, artisans unravel the yarn and attach it to the loom. This marks the start of weeks of work. Moroccan rugs are thick, soft, and durable, thanks to the wool from local mountain sheep. The Bach has around 300 sheep and goats. He shears them in March and sells most of the wool to weavers.
بالنسبه للزربيلوت والزكيتيه كاين اولا المورود الطبيعي اللي هو الصوف ديال سيروا اللي هو فيه الخرفان الصغار والزغبه طويله وفيه دوك الخرفان احسن صوف في المغرب وثالث جوده من ناحيه الصوف في العالم من بعد نيوزيلندا واستراليا. بالنسبه للطبيعي هو اللي غلا تخدم باليد الصوفه.
The Bach sells his wool for around $10 per kilogram.
صعيب السمح صعيب كلشي خصنا الماء والعلف غالي كلشي غالي والجبوله كطلع مع الجبوله طلعوا هبط نطلبوا الله يرحمنا وكلشي الجبوله غالي الجبوله قاصحين.
Back at the cooperative, artisans are busy dyeing the wool. They use natural ingredients that create rich and varied colours. Artisans mix alum stones in boiling water to help the yarn absorb the dye. Fatma uses ingredients like rosemary and henna. She uses pomegranate peel to make yellow. Keeping track of what the raw materials cost and factoring that into the price of a rug is another challenge. Artisans who use natural dyes instead of chemical dyes need more raw materials. And some of these ingredients, like madder, a root used for red dye, are expensive when bought in large amounts. This dyed yarn forms Fatma's palette of colours that she weaves into the base to form a design. When all the materials are ready, Fatma starts to weave.
المرحلة اللي صعيبة هو المنشج هو العقدة اللي صعيبة في المنشج في الزربية كاع.
Each knot is tied individually, one row at a time. After decades of practice, Fatma is able to quickly weave dyed yarn through the base.
كنديروا الحاشية صافي وكنخدموا الزربية خيط بخيط. نديروا داك الخيط اللي درنا بعقلنا باش غادي كنخدموه هكا حتى تكمل الزربية. الزربية الوزكيتية ما تلقاي وحده بحال وحده ولا الأمازيغية كل وحده والشكل ديالها.
Each region of Morocco has its own designs and motifs. Like Beni Urain from the Middle Atlas, or Daznacht rugs from northwestern Africa, which use several weaving techniques to create complex patterns. On large rugs, artisans work side by side. The more complicated the pattern, the harder it is to weave. Large rugs can take months to make, and the bigger the rug, the more expensive it becomes.
كنديرو التويزة بعضياتنا حتى نكملو، كنتجمعوا عليها حتى كنكونوا كتار، حيت ما يمكنليكش دير الزربية بوحدك، ما يمكنش. كنفرحوا حيت بينا نساليو واحد العمل اللي كنا خدامين فيه وعطينا الوقت كثيره ليه، غنسترحوا وكنجتهدوا وكنخدموا بزاف بكري، غادي ناخذوا واحد شويه الراحه عاوتاني، كنفرحوا بديك الساعه شويه.
Unfortunately, weaving a beautiful rug doesn't guarantee a profit. Most weavers live and work in rural areas with limited access to transportation. They don't have access to the markets and are exploited by middlemen. These obstacles make it challenging for women to sell their rugs directly.
كنبيعوا الزربيه ديك الساعه كنبيعوها في السوق، كدير الزربيه، المراه كدير الزربيه وديها الراجل للسوق يبيعها. دابا ملي درنا هذا المجال ديال التعاونيات راه ولينا كنبيعوا ريوسنا، كنبيعوا للزبناء كيجيو عندنا، ولا كنبيعوا في الواتساب، وان شاء الله نتمنوا نبيعوا في الانترنت. المشكل دابا عندنا حيت ما قاريينش، وهذا الجيل الجديد اللي قاري راه ما مسوق لهذا العمل، وحنا اللي بغينا هذا العمل خصنا شويه التكاوين والقرايه باش نبيعوا ريوسنا ديريكت. كنتمنوا ان شاء الله يكون عندنا سيت في الانترنت والفيسبوك، وغادا نتعلموا حتى حنا كيفاش غادي نتواصلوا مع الزبون باش نربحوا حتى حنا شويه. لا باقي ما عندنا شي وسيله اللي غنبيعوا فيه ونتواصلوا مع الناس على برا ولا.
Several direct trade companies partner with weavers and pay a higher price for their rugs. After shipping costs and import taxes, the final price of a large rug can easily exceed $1,000. But the pay artisans receive from these companies varies. It can range from only 20% to over 60% of the price you see online. Within Morocco, rugs are sold in markets like this that can be found across the country. Janah has sold rugs for 30 years. He says his customers are around 60% locals and 40% tourists.
بالنسبه للسوق هنا بزاف الانواع ديال الزربيه، كاين ديال الرباط، كاين ديال الاطلس، كاين ديال بديوراين. ثالث حاجه هي الزربيه الوزقيتيه قديمه اللي معروفه باللون الصفر الزعفران والالوان الطبيعيين الابيض والاسود، ويمكن تستعمل على جوج جهات، الجهه ديال الصيف والجهه ديال الشتاء. كاينه هذه تتسمى الزليج الامازيغي، لا موزايك، واحد لابارتي فيها لينو وفيها تيسي وفيها الروبروداج. قديما الزربيه كانت ما تتباع ما تتشرى في المغرب، كانوا يعطيوها في الهدايا وتتعطى في الاعراس مدن. دابا تبارك الله راه عايشين فيها الناس وقراو فيها وعايشين فيها وداروا فيها المسائل.
But the further a rug gets from the weaver, the more expensive it becomes. And while joining a cooperative can help increase pay, it doesn't guarantee it.
الوسطاء هما اللي تيربحوا بزاف، اللي تيديو لبرا لمراكش وأكادير وفاس تيبيعوا على برا. اما بالنسبه للبائع ديال التعاونيات تيديوها شويه، ولكن المراه بزاف هي اللي ضيعت بزاف من ناحيه البيع ديال الزربيه. بالنسبه للزربيه دابا تتباع هنا ب 500 درهم المتر كاري، تتمشي عند واحد تيبيعها ب 700 درهم، وتتمشي لمراكش تتباع بواحد 1500 المتر كاري ولا 2000 درهم، دوبل وبعض المرات اكثر.
Authentic wool rugs also compete with rugs made outside of Morocco that imitate traditional designs. Some of these are made of wool, but many use cotton or polyester. Like many traditional crafts, passing on rug making has been a challenge.
هاد الشباب راه ما تيشوفوش المصدر ديال الربح ديال هاد المهنه هادي. قالوا لك راه صعيبه الخدمه، اصلا صعيبه الخدمه، وهما القرايه وقالوا لك راه ما فيها لا نتريت وما فيها هكا ما فيها هكا.
But these artisans say it's important to preserve this tradition.
بالنسبه للزربيه الامازيغيه والزربيه الطزناق ما يمكنش تنقار لحقاش فيها الموروث الثقافي ديال المنطقه وفيها العيش ديال الساكنه. الجيل كيدوز عليه وتتورث ماشي تتعلم.
الزربيه موروث ثقافي ديال البلاد، حيت فيها المعيشه وفيها كتعمر لك الوقت ديالك وكتخرجي شي حاجه من راسك، حيت ماشي غير كنخدموا كنبدعوا كنعبروا في الزربيه. داكشي علاش ما كنحسوش بالتعب ديالها، حيت كنبغيوها.